There you go. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know where everybody is. Maybe most of us in the US today. This is my first fire session with Mike. Mike, welcome. Mike is our ambassador for North America. It's such a pleasure to be connected with you. Thank you for making my life a lot easier. I would like to start by presenting the video about the design leadership course. It's interesting and exciting, and it's a good way for you to understand why we're here today having this conversation. So bear with me for a second so I can share this with you. And give me a thumbs up once you can hear it and watch it.
Design is leadership.
In recent years, we've begun to see that the most successful organizations are the ones that infuse their business with design at the core.
In our 12-week program, you will hear from and interact with some of the world's most highly regarded design and innovation leaders from across the globe. Our exclusive masterclass sessions will give you insights into how design leaders think and act in order to elevate design in their own organizations to deliver exceptional outcomes.
You will participate in more hands-on workshops with design leaders from your region, in which you will deep dive into some of the theory and practical activities behind the masterclass topics.
The Design Leadership Program is for those who want to learn how to manage and grow their team, develop their design vision, act as an advocate and catalyst for design within their organization, and generally navigate the challenging yet rewarding world of design leadership. We know that the realm of design is constantly evolving.
Our biggest goal is to help you develop the skills needed to become a great design leader who can continue to navigate the ever-changing world of business and society over the next decade.
We hope to see you in Season 2 of the Design Leadership Program.
There you go. That's just to get you guys excited. We'll now start sharing the slide decks that will guide our presentation today. For those that don't know me yet, my name is Luna. I'm the program manager for ECHO's Design Leadership course. This is the session today is part of a series that is ongoing since, I would say, most likely around this time last year, when we bring people from all over the world to bring their perspective between design leadership and other themes, such as the one today, education. Thank you, Marina, for being here. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Mike, for putting everybody together. I would like to present a little bit of ECHOS. We are an independent lab driven by design. We have 3 business models: the School of Design Thinking, which is the one hosting us today. We have ECHOS Innovation Projects and ECHOS Ventures. We help business create values and innovation for good. And we help people and organizations to master mindset and tools. We're a global team. I'm the only one in the US currently. I'm really hoping to have someone in the same time zone working with me, because otherwise I am never really working on regular hours. We have a big team in Europe, a big team in Brazil and Australia. We've been together for, well, I've been working for ECHOS for a year and a half, but ECHOS is in the market for the past 11 years. We graduated over 400,000 people, 40,000 people when we had our labs in Rio and Sao Paulo, and over 70,000 people ever since we became digital. We are part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. We are the only innovation lab, independent innovation lab that it's part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance, conducting research on design all over the world. And a little bit about ECHOS Design Leadership Program. This is season 2 is starting on May 9th. It's a 12-week program. This is a little bit of the journey that we mapped out. and you'll be able to find this information on the website and the syllabus. And that journey is actually an unfolding of these 4 spheres, which is about you and yourself. When you are a leader, you need to understand who you are, because who you are will necessarily impact on the leadership that you extend to others. It's a lot about you and others. So you need to have the capability of deep listening. You need to have the capability of giving feedback, being empathetic. And that would also translate in what you and your team is designing. So products and services. So you need to understand more about the market. You need to understand more about its strategies. And because you're always designing something that will be given to someone or impacting someone's life, it is a lot about you and systems. So we broke down these 4 spheres into 12 weeks and 12 different themes, each one led by one of our global master classes. This is almost the whole lineup for season 2. We try to change the names every season so we can have different perspectives on design leadership. Those are our partners from all over the world. It starts on May 9th and it goes until August 3rd. We have a little bit of a break between this 12 weeks for the sake of summer vacations, just so people can have some time to decompress. And if you have questions, it's most likely me who you'll be talking to. So you can say something here in the chat, or later on before we wrap up, I'm gonna give you guys my email. But with no further, Mike, the stage is yours. I'm here to listen. I'm quite biased because whenever Marina is involved and whoever Marina introduces to me already has high value. We are friends for many years now. I don't even know how long we've known each other for. So I am just super excited to be hearing what you guys have to say. Victor, welcome to the tribe as well. And let's have fun, everyone.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. I've had the pleasure of knowing Marina for a little bit, and then Victor. Our interactions have been thorough, and I've been super excited to get to know and chat with everyone. So as we get started, our main topic today is talking about design and education. And so these two disciplines kind of blend quite a bit. And so before we get started, I want to kind of give a little give an opportunity to our panelists here to kind of discuss a little bit about their background and then how they came to be in this kind of design education intersection. So to start off, we'll start off with Marina. If you can just give us a little background and then how you came to design.
Absolutely. I would like to say the title and roles that are listed under my picture are it's like leftover from another one, so that is not my my title and company. So I am a multidisciplinary designer and educator and entrepreneur. I kind of one of those people, like many in design, working within kind of different universes. And I primarily work in intersectional spaces. So right now I'm in the intersection of service design, education, and social justice, and looking at how the products and service offering landscape can help aid in that those categories. I founded a company called the Y Lab, which is a little bit similar to Ecos in that it has a consulting innovation lab arm, an education arm, and then a ventures arm to help launch startups and kind of help incubate community type projects. And we focus specifically on this equity driven service innovation model and integrating a lot of the critical elements of design, especially design for equitable futures, such as community co-design practices and trauma-informed practices, and kind of in this regenerative space of everything we do. We want to make sure that it's part of a greater loop that can help create different levels of self-efficacy and self-sustaining kind of futures for whoever we interact with. I also do a lot of community work and activism. So I'm currently do a lot of work in the LGBTQ plus SWANA communities for people in the SWANA region. So it's Southwest Asia, Northern Africa, that cluster of countries, which is where I'm from, Armenia, one of the countries in that area. So I'm on the board of an organization that serves people of Armenian descent and background around the world. And I do also kind of individual community-based work that also helps serve that need, such as I have a community publishing arm of my work to kind of infuse some of that empathy component to carry over into the design and community design work. So I have a lot of different pieces, but it makes sense in context. But the thing that connects all of it together is this design and education piece. I got into design in kind of a roundabout way where I started my career as a jazz violinist, completely unrelated to anything. But my primary corporate career was in the space of marketing innovation. And that's kind of in the very early days of marketing innovation, where everyone was hand coding HTML emails and everyone got carpal tunnel. And we were kind of begging for the right to be able to go out and do customer research. I was rogue. I would go do customer research just on my own accord because it was still not bought into larger corporate structures. But what that did was I was doing a lot of elements of design without realizing that that's what was happening. And so when I transitioned over into service design and kind of plugged into this broader global community of these practices, everything kind of started to gel together and make sense. I got into the education piece of it through a little bit by accident. Because when I started in service design in Los Angeles, which is where I've lived for a very long stretch after moving from Armenia, it was really difficult to gain excitement over design, especially over service design. This was a very UX heavy town. It was a very kind of advertising heavy town. Some of the other elements where there was some intersections, but I was really excited about service design and community design and all of these pieces. And it wasn't my area, because just wasn't quite there yet. And so I got into teaching as a way of kind of creating the market I wanted to serve, and really helping people see that this is something valuable that they can adopt, understanding that adopting design is actually part of a longer lead strategy that is for the benefit of the greater community if we embark on that journey, and help people understand that value. And along the way, I realized that design and education are completely inextricably linked. And I will stop there because I would love to, I want to hear all about Victor as well, but I'm actually really excited to be at the intersection of both of those things. And I think that's kind of the future of design, which is what guides me as kind of a North Star.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I feel like we owe you a debt of gratitude while building the industry and doing all the things at the same time, helping to kind of pave the way for others and go through some of that. So, Victor, I'd like to hear your background, and if you could share a little bit about how you came to the design education space as well.
Yeah, thank you. I am the Chief Experience Officer and Service Design Lead at NASA for the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Research programs. So we act kind of as a broker between small businesses and research institutions on one side who need financial assistance, skill sets, connections in order to move and accelerate, or at least mature their technology development across the Valley of Death, and private investors, or really the government. So NASA program managers, but program managers at other arms and parts, departments and agencies of the federal government who have technology needs that they're not able to fulfill because they have limited human resources, or maybe it involves a specific skill set. And so we help provide financial resources, but also technical assistance and other non-financial assistance to help them further develop their technology, so that the ultimate goal is what we call transition. So that it leaves our program and it gets funded further by some part of the government or a private investor. And then ultimately the goal of infusion, where it gets infused for NASA into a mission, but for the Department of Transportation into a road or a bridge, for the Department of Energy into a fuel cell or a solar panel, or commercialization, where a private investor doesn't just invest in it, but then takes it and actually puts it out in the world. So this is a multifaceted service with, you know, offline and online components, digital, non-digital interactions and touch points. And our job is to improve the experience of the customers and of the employees, and really the health of the service. So taking a systemic lens to that. We have both an economic development and a racial and gender equity lens to it. So we are actually trying specifically to build the economy with a focus purely on small businesses, because most of the companies who receive contracts from the government by dollar amount, the biggest ones are in aerospace and defense, and even outside of that, the big consulting companies like Accenture, Deloitte, or KPMG, or Boston Consulting Group, et cetera. So we're actually focused on building the economy with a focus on small businesses. And then beyond that, we actually want to increase the participation and representation of women-owned small businesses, veteran-owned small businesses, service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and minority-owned small businesses. And then for the Small Business Technology Transfer Research Program, the second one, in which we work with collaborations between small businesses and research institutions, where most of those research institutions are universities, we're trying to increase the representation and participation of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, women's colleges, NANTUs, so Native American non-tribal universities, Alaska Native and Hawaii Native institutions, and Asian American and Pacific Islander institutions. So that is actually specifically part of our mission. So we definitely have, like, technical objectives of the technical excellence of the technology that these small businesses or universities have and want help with, but we actually have programmatic and mission objectives of what the makeup of these people working with NASA should look like, and we're trying to move it in a more just direction. So that's what I do, my day job. I help manage all of that, and I'm part of it. I'm a practitioner as well, and then I do a lot of community projects. I have a consulting company that I've been forming, and I do projects on the side. I mainly tried, to be honest, to do projects in communities where I'm already a member, as opposed to being an outsider. That's the reason why I do what I do at NASA, because I'm not an outsider trying to improve the employee experience. I got hired in, and I'm an employee working on my own experience, because I do a lot of participatory design processes. So, for instance, I have a project where we're a group of parents at a particular school, and we are working on redesigning our PTA, Parent Teacher Association, or organization, PTO, to become a racially just PTA or PTO. I have another project where I'm working with some schools to use both futures design and systems practice, systemic design. And we're trying to envision, let's say over a 20-year, 25-year time horizon, a racially just school community, and then building a roadmap of all the design changes and experiments we want to do to our community so that we can reach that preferred future, and that preferred system of all the dynamics that create the experiences that people have within that school community. I have another one where I'm doing trauma responsive systems practice, where we're working with people in North Carolina who have a history of experience of dealing with racialized trauma, and designing better supports and programs to help people in those situations. So I act as a coach in that. So that's some of the stuff that I'm doing. I enjoy the work that I do. The community work keeps me grounded, and the public sector work is one in which we're really trying to bend the business goals, you could say, of the government towards those of the people, because we feel a government of the people, the government's needs should be the same as the people's needs. In terms of my journey to design and education, education has always been a part of me. I think the very first educational experience I had in terms of being on the side of someone helping to create and form educational experiences was as a third grader, where I was asked by my teacher to help tutor students in first grade. So that was a really cool experience, and I loved it from that moment on, and I kept doing it all the way through high school and college. I was doing after school programs, and when I was in graduate school, I was working teaching sections of courses, substitute teaching for professors, and teaching some classes myself, etc. And I've never actually ever stopped. Even if it wasn't a part of my main job, it was always something that I was doing on the side. So I do a lot of that type of work even still today, and it's a part of my job. I actually do a lot of educational design, instructional design, learning design in what I do. And then design, I think, was something I learned because of education, because we actually design in education. We do instructional design and learning design. And then I studied engineering, and so I had to do a lot of design from a mechanical engineering perspective. And I noticed that there were some times when I would do projects. I think it first started when I was in El Salvador. We were designing these dual composting latrines, and then I came back a year later to see kind of how things were going. And one family was using it as a closet space, and another family was using it as a special bathroom just for guests. And so I was never taught, at least in my educational experience, about the human side, the human factor side. And so bringing that in, because I was taught more about the technical side, has been a really life-changing experience. So I've enjoyed that, and have carried that all through. So I started doing information and communication technology design for scientific applications, eventually moved over to web applications, and eventually moved over into service design, social impact design, you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like, just from hearing you guys talk, and thank you for providing that excellent background and context, that design and education has really been intertwined in both of your lives for a very long time. And so I realized kind of the next question that I'm going to pose to you guys might be a little challenging. And so, over the years that you've been practicing both of these, like, what is an insight or two that you feel would be really, impactful, that that you found over your design and education journeys? Victor,
Okay,
if
I'll
you're
go
ready, go
first.
ahead. Yeah.
I know. So this session is about design and education and the intersection, but I think that one of the biggest insights that I've learned in my journey is that design is not only practiced by designers; it's practiced by everyone. And I think there's been some confusion. I think it's because of the rise of the professional designer and the professional researcher, where we begin to think of this design and design research as something that is done by this specific person or professional, instead of something that's actually incorporated into everything that we do. So there's no time period. I can go back to the history of humans and Homo sapiens, and even before Homo sapiens, where people didn't come into a situation and come up with ideas to try to figure things out. It is a natural process. We design in many, many different jobs. So the insight then is that, of course, it makes sense that design is part of education, because when you're building educational experiences, you have to design them. But it's not specific to education. It's everywhere. We design policies. We design laws. We design services. We design spaces and classrooms. We design ways to do things faster or better. Like it's actually something that's built into the job. So for all the faults, and there are many, many faults with design thinking, I think one good thing was the growing awareness that, oh, design is something, I think in the way they say it, that can be practiced by everyone. But I would go further and say that actually is practiced by everyone.
Yeah. Marina, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I love that answer. I have to say, when we were kind of preparing for this dialogue via email, Victor shared some of his thoughts. It was kind of an interesting experience for me to kind of see one of those moments where, this is one of my favorite moments in design, where you find people who are thinking in similar ways, and you have that, like, you too, me too. And I think this is a little bit piggybacking off of what Victor is saying about the insight with design, where I feel like those of us who are advocating for design, we're thinking along a certain path. And when communities practice design, and kind of people within their regular lives practice design, which I wholeheartedly agree with, everyone is a designer. We just don't necessarily call it that. There's this little spark that occurs. But the interesting part of that is, I feel like we sometimes feel like we're alone. And this is even, this was, I think, a lot more exacerbated in the early days, before kind of design became as much of a household name as it is now. But I think there was this little experience of creating something new, trying something different. Some people just, blazed through it because they had pathways. Some people kind of felt their way through it to try to figure it out. But I think that the commonality that I've always kind of noticed is we feel like we're the oddball, or we feel like we're seeing a world that the rest of the world isn't seeing. It's kind of like an X-ray vision. And there's a bit of a calibration process that happens with it, where we realize there's others who think like us, and there's a whole, there are many methodologies and mindsets that go into this that are shared. And so I think this connects very much to education, because to me, this is one of the spaces where we can exercise power in numbers by finding each other, finding those of us who are thinking along similar paths, and whatever our levels of design, design knowledge and information is, kind of we have this chance to equalize that, to learn from each other, and to really bond in this space of we're all seeing these alternate universes, and we want to work toward that together. And I do think one of the best, and maybe one of the only places to do that is in education, because like Victor said, it is a little bit challenging to kind of think about, design as a profession that only designers do, kind of opening that up to see that design is something that we can all do, but we're still working out kind of who has the jurisdiction and how do we normalize that within society. But I think that spark of a moment of, we see the same view, we want the same future, we see the same kinds of paths to it. Let's get together and find a space to talk about that. To me, that's what design education means.
Well, and let me jump in on that's a really interesting point about who has the jurisdiction and how does it work? Because I think when you talk about design education, we tend to default to thinking of the educating of non-designers about design, or people who are learning to do design better, right? Mm-hmm. So when I think of the world that we live in, right, you think of the economic crises that we face, right, of rising inequality and poverty around the world that we haven't fully eradicated, even though we have enough, right? The ecological crisis where we're continuing to destroy and damage our planet and trying to shift it, the effects of that to other people, but failing at that. The conflict crisis, where we still have places in our world that are caught in recurring conflicts. And even if we're not necessarily in an ongoing war, we have a lot of tribal and racial and group-based conflicts. And even the spiritual crisis, right? Where none of our religions or value systems have been effective enough to help us deal with any of the first three crises. And you look at design and the history of design and all of that, design has seemed to serve this order that we live in, right? This capitalistic, patriarchal, extractive, unlimited growth type of process. So when I think about that, and I think about doing design, especially when I have practiced what I tend to call radical participatory design, you're working with people who are not designers, not professional designers, and you're thinking, okay, we need to teach them about design. But in this way that design has been practiced, that has served industry and just served the way that things have gone on, we forget that the learning is bi-directional, or at least multi-directional, that just as important as whatever design tools and design education we learn are what I would call the lived experiential knowledge, or the cultural, spiritual knowledge, and in many ways, even more important. And so we as designers, when we're working in these communities, we need to learn some of that information in order to practice design effectively. And it can be even more important in a lot of the projects that I've practiced. So it's a multi-directional thing, and it's not just education of people who are not designers, but it's designers learning cultural tools that are super important in the work that we do.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, and that reminds me of the Paulo Freire. I always stumble over his last name.
Paulo Freire.
But Freire model of teaching, where it's a typical classroom where we're all there to kind of facilitate that conversation and learn from each other. And yes, I very much agree with you on that. I think in a lot of ways that's radical as well, that mindset. But I think that's partly why I get excited also to see, like, I got excited to see your profile, Victor, and seeing kind of others in the community who do that kind of work and are thinking in that way, because we're normalizing it little by little.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you guys are bringing up, because it's like we learn that like both ways, you know, from that dynamic. And what it's kind of bringing up for me is, how do we use all of this knowledge to be able to meet people where they're at, right? And be able to extract or I shouldn't say extract. I feel it's a little bit rough, but how do we make that knowledge go both ways, right? And so I'm curious, as if we were able to do this in a little bit of a future thinking scenario, like what impact might that provide for like the design community, for the education community? Like what would we be able to accomplish? We would more effectively be able to communicate about what and how we do things.
I guess, you know, one of the things that I've been thinking about and working on is the fact that, you know, in a lot of our society, we preference, I think I just said this, we preference certain types of knowledge, right? So we're really big, at least in Western societies, on preferencing the written word. But there are other ways of storing knowledge and communicating knowledge, transmitting knowledge, using knowledge besides the written word. And so I think some of the stuff that really excites me these days is the increased awareness. It's not as big as I want it to be yet. And in growing understanding of other methodologies, especially indigenous methodologies, in doing the work that we do. But also, even think of it like this, what design is, to answer your question, Mike, depends on where you are, right? I mean, yes, a lot of us do design as a problem-solving process, but design could be problem-solving, it could be wayfinding, it could be self-expression, it could be beauty creation, it could be so many different things, and I haven't even named half of them. And so maybe there's a part of design that is quote unquote technical, and maybe we need to figure out what that is, but there's definitely a part of it that is contextual. And so it can mutate. And so I think one of the things that excites me is about understanding what can it mean in different contexts, which means that I have a lot to learn because I only know it in my context. And as I go around the world and have done projects, I'm learning of the different ways people do it and the different purposes that it has, and the different directions that it can move in. And that excites me. In other words, when you talk about the future of this, it means we're moving towards a pluriversal vision of what design can be, instead of a one world, a world of many worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love the call out to different types of knowledge and kind of where it comes from, and that very much resonate with that, because I always like to tell the story that the way I learned about design was actually through my grandmother, who, you know, she's kind of a reoccurring thread. She's an important figure in my life. She's this Soviet era, you know, Armenian lady, and she would notice really interesting things in the world around her. And I just remember so distinctly when I was a child, she would notice things about the world, and I don't know how she learned the word design. I'm still trying to track how, you know, where this came into the Armenian vocabulary, because she did not speak English, but she would look at something and she would be like, "This is design." And it was an appreciation for anything that was thoughtfully done. And I remember one time I asked her, like, "That's great, Grandma, that's design. How do you explain design? What is it?" And she would say, design, this is in Armenian, and this was the only word she knew. She would say, design is the opposite of I don't care. And I thought that was interesting, especially from her viewpoint, but because it really highlighted that design is about caring, and it's about love, and it's about serving your community. Even, you know, service design, the word service always kind of touches my heart, because I always think of it as being of service. And I think it's important that we maintain that in the dialogue, especially as we talk about futures, because that's where we can guide and participate in conversations about design that are in this circular regenerative way, where it's about the futures that are being created. It's about the love that's being created and the care for community, and whatever goes into that, that cannot really be quantified by, you know, a 5-step methodology or whatever. It's really part of, it's the greater whole is going to be what defines it. And that is very different based on who defines it.
Yeah, when we're talking about defining it, and I think you both brought up really good points about, you know, defining it and then also like contextualizing it, and it comes in many different shapes and forms. And so I'm curious, as we go into like our next kind of question here, is that what are these disciplines like? How are they linked together? Like, how are these contextual pieces of the services that we provide as designers? Like, how are they interwoven that we might not be seeing, or maybe we are seeing and need to share a little bit more?
Marina, you always you always make me speak first.
Oh no, I'm sorry. This is purely selfish.
I'm sorry. I should probably
but
prime one of you guys.
please go. I genuinely want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. I guess I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but I think of 4 large categories. So let me see if I can get this straight. So I think of design for education, or you could say design for education, which I just think of as instructional design or learning design. I think of number 2, design in education. So that's how I might bring in design into primary education, secondary education, et cetera. So I have done workshops where I work with, in the United States, middle school science teachers and how to integrate design into the science curriculum for those students. That's an example of bringing design into education. I have talked with a teacher who brings in systems thinking into her primary classroom in really simple ways. So that's an example of design in education. Number 3, I think of education for design, or think of education about design. So that's normally what people think of when they say design education. I'm going to run a workshop and teach people about design or how to do design, et cetera. And then number 4, I think of education in design. So I'm doing design. What education do I need to do in design? Well, I might need to do education because the design team has members who have never done a particular activity that we're about to do. So I might need to educate about that, or we need to learn about that before we do it. Sometimes I've done projects where I'm only there temporarily and other people are going to carry it on. So there's education for capacity building, and so that they can continue on with the work after we're gone. So consultancy would be an example of that. There is education that's naturally a part of, we talked already, participatory design. When you're designing with stakeholders, executives, quote unquote non-designers, who are learning about the design process, but you are also learning about their lived experience or cultural experience. There's also education when you're doing design in terms of advocacy, which they don't always tell you when you go to school or learn about design, that you may often be in an organization that doesn't value design as much as you do. So in addition to the design work you do, you have to do kind of advocacy work or educational advocacy work about it. So I think of those categories: design for education, design in education, education for design, and education in design.
That's wonderful. That's why I kind of took a step back with this, because I think this was also part of the pre-priming for this conversation. And I think I had been thinking about all of these different elements, but I remembered you had kind of, Victor, responded to that and really framed it in such a clear way, that to me, that's really what is representative of the pieces within design. I think I see it kind of as like an infinite loop of going in and out of thinking about design, sharing design, learning, learning everything else, to be able to practice design. Kind of, you can think about it as an infinity symbol. And I kind of, it feels a lot like kind of these processes of what it means to kind of code switch and go in and out of different mindsets and practices. I know code switching isn't always kind of a positive thing, but this idea of, I think, being able to change your mental and emotional state to go from learner to doer to beginner to teacher to advocate. To me, that's one of the ways where design and education are linked, this leading into kind of the very specific practical ways that Victor has outlined. I personally believe you cannot do one without the other, but I do have a very strong bias of education is in my spirit for my entire life as well. So I think that can be true of many things, but I think having practiced design and kind of having started in this intersectional space, it's really, really illuminating that I think even as we think about the futures that we want to create and how community oriented we aim to be, I think that being able to kind of go in and out of those different mindsets and heart spaces of design and education, to me, that's what's going to enable a lot of it.
Yeah, and I'll just add that remember that there are many different kinds of designers, right? It's a very large umbrella, a large tent, a big term. So instructional designers are designers. So just in and of themselves, they embody both. They are designing instruction or learning, and they have to know educational theories and pedagogy, but they do design. It may not be necessarily be the same type of design methodology you use for a particular like industrial design, but they are doing design. In fact, and I advocate for them because I've had jobs as an instructional designer, so they're designers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that I want to get, because I feel like we have a really robust conversation, and I want to make sure that we get to some Q&A, because I'm sure the team will have it, because the chat's blowing up with some quality stuff here as it relates to like STEM and educating primary and secondary school children. So I'm wondering, for example, like children practice design almost naturally, right? So they research, they learn through toys and verbal language, social cues, all these types of things, and then they test it out in the real world and get lifetime feedback on a regular basis. So it seemed kind of natural to kind of incorporate design and into the education of the primary school curriculum and K through 12 and the education space. And so I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on, like, for example, how that could be done in a way that's a little bit more robust than maybe what we might be seeing now. Let's go with Marina first this time.
What you're saying about kind of the innate nature of design resonates a lot. I have a new nephew. I'm a first-time auntie, which is a very exciting role. And kind of watching the intentionality and kind of the intuition that goes into doing things and kind of interacting with the world, I think is really fascinating. To me, this is kind of an opportunity to build upon that and also highlight that and draw attention to those intuition spaces, because I think this is an excellent starting point, and maybe even a big part of the point, where we can kind of help people step into how they can create the world around them and kind of what that means in the space of how empowering that is, and how it allows us to kind of question a lot of the things that are in the world around us that we might flag intuitively as something that as injustice or broken systems or kind of headed in all the wrong directions. So I think that's my view.
Yeah. From an educational perspective, one of the big taxonomies that has persisted for many years, since I think 1954, is Bloom's taxonomy. It's been revised, but normally you think of, I first remember, then I understand, then I apply. And then the next three were also stacked, but they were revised, and they're kind of, you can do either of these in any order, but synthesize, evaluate, and create. And the goal is you want to get to those higher levels where you're synthesizing, evaluating, creating. But in a lot of the ways we do our teaching, especially with the areas such as language, which we apply to social studies, or mathematics, which we apply to science, we spend so much time learning all the rules and the syntax and the grammar and the mathematical rules that we might stay just in that remember, understand, apply. And one of the things that applying design to the K-12 space allows you to do is to flip it on its head, that maybe one of the ways that you come to understand something is, instead of being told it, is by actually creating something and seeing how it works. So actually using the higher level in the educational taxonomy to get at the lower level, in a sense. So there's lots of things that are, there's inquiry-based learning, there's problem-based learning, which I think works really well for problem-based types of design. There's service learning and expeditionary learning, which is my favorite, which involves breaking up the, let's say, academic year into multi-week deep dives that focus on a theme or a topic, within which you have field visits and field research and labs out in the world in context, expert visits. They might come to you, or you might go out to see the experts, and you're doing all of that work in the community. So it's much more learning in context. I think all of that fits really nicely with design. But I think the key thing for me, I think, is that it allows you to do a lot of the creation to get at the learning and understanding. I'll put an example of a blog of a teacher who uses systems thinking in a primary classroom in really kind of simple but innovative ways.
Awesome. I want to add something, kind of a call out, especially at the K through 12 space, that I just remembered. Something I've been interested in lately is looking at how we gravitate toward doing design and what are the levels of privilege inherent in that. Because I do think that I'm hypothesizing at this moment that doing design within our society is a little bit self-selected. And I always ask the question of, I kind of personify it as, the shy, immigrant kid in the corner, how, like, if they don't get engaged in certain ways, they may never be able to participate in these ecosystems. And I say that because I was that shy immigrant kid in the corner. My brother was that. Everyone I know and love kind of, they have kind of that, they don't necessarily, not everybody has kind of that cluster of whatever it is within the privilege, their cluster of privileges that lead us to kind of self-select in these types of roles within society, or even our ability to believe that we can make things and make a difference. So I've been really interested lately in what does it look like to nurture that and to kind of be the advocate for someone who might normally fall through the cracks in being able to practice design at whatever capacity, or realize that what they're doing is valuable and is part of making things and doing designy things. So an interesting space. It's still kind of a hypothesis space that I'm exploring, but there might be something there.
No, I think it's a great comment, because the creative reaction labs based in,
love them,
I believe, yeah, they have this training called How Design Thinking Reinforces White Supremacy. So there's lots of ways, and one kind of good example of ways in which the ways we practice design kind of exclude certain people is just simple. Think of, I don't know what the right term is, so I'm just going to use improper terms, I'm sorry, but think of extroverted thinkers and introverted thinkers. A lot of times the way we're taught design, or the way we do design with a team, we have these sessions where people have to come up with ideas immediately, like think of brainstorming. But there are a lot of people that they need time to process alone, think about, and then they can give you wonderful ideas, great ideas. So just even something as simple as that, changing our processes so that they work for neurodiversity and diversity in all types and fashions is really, really important. So there's a need, thank you for bringing that up, Marina, really big, to redesign design education in a sense. But I think we can't redesign it with the same mindsets and paradigms that created some of the problems. So I need other people to help me, or I need to be a part of a group of people because I don't have all the answers on my own.
And I don't think any of us really do. And so that's why we come together in these spaces. So that way we can kind of share knowledge and share thoughts and be able to kind of open up the space. And so I know that we're running a little close on time, but I wanted to open the floor to Marina or Victor, if there's anything that we haven't really discussed yet that maybe has been top of mind that you just want to like call out before we go to Q&A.
I mean, you know, this is not, there is not enough time in the world to do this, and this is not a conversation, but I do want to acknowledge some of the conversation that also started in inequities within design. Kind of, we just talked about it right now, kind of in that K through 12 space, but this really does, you know, design education, design justice, they're intricately linked, and there's a whole conversation we could have about this for hours, but that is something that is important for us to acknowledge and something for us to keep questioning as we do our work.
Yeah, and I would say, I know, Mike, you said that, yeah, that's why we do this work together with other people. But I think in many cases when we do it with other people, there are people that still aren't there at the table. And at the same time, it's not enough just to have a diverse group at the table. And by that, I mean, I'm trying to think of examples, but, you know, James Baldwin said this, Ta-Nehisi Coates says this, that whiteness isn't, at least in the US, a skin color. It's a way of being in the world, at least the way they're referring to it. In other words, you don't have to have a white skin color to operate with that. It's the same thing with patriarchy. Both men and women and non-binary people can operate in the world in patriarchal ways, right? Domination, hierarchy, that type of, you know, extraction. And so there's a really wonderful designer, colleague of mine named Mansi Gupta, who runs this studio called Unconformed Studio. Yeah, and she differentiates between design by women and design for women. So yes, we got to have design by women, diversify our teams, but some of that patriarchy can live inside of us even if we are not men. So some of the white supremacy can be inside of me. We can live in a capitalist society and I have a nonprofit, but I'm still operating in capitalist ways, or my faith-based community or my university still operate. So that seeps into us. And so there's work to be done to get that out and transform design from design as imperialism to design as liberation.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because there's some just intrinsic ways that sometimes we operate that have been either curated or systematically like ingrained in us that we're probably maybe not be aware of. And so we need to kind of remove those covers and maybe some of those biases and be able to kind of look at ourselves in the way that we're designing, the way that we're operating the nonprofits or for-profits organizations that we create in a way that is more equitable on all fronts. So I want to open the floor up to any of our lovely guests that have been listening and probably had some vibrant chats. If anybody has any questions for our guests that they'd like to share.
One at a time, everybody.
No? Well, if that's the case, I think, Luna, do you have any closing words?
I do. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I also wish this conversation could be going longer and longer. So I'll invite everyone who is here now or that will be watching this recording later on. And I'm going to make an invitation without even talking to the three of you. But we could potentially, and even Hoda, which is also our ambassador from the Middle East, for us to keep this conversation happening. We still have some time between now and the beginning of the course, or even later on. As I said, these fire sessions are an ongoing project from Echoes, and I would love to invite you again, because I was having this conversation with Jelena, and sometimes we do have the sensation that, oh my God, having a conversation won't make any change currently because of the big course, because of the mindsets, because of the intrinsic mentalities. But I believe more we talk about these things, more we will find people that think alike. And by like Marina said in the beginning, and by connecting those people that think alike, we never know what kind of project, we never know what kind of power, we never know what kind of strength we'll find to change whatever it is that is established that is not serving a bigger purpose. So the invitation is there. I would love for us to keep having this conversation again. The master, I even lost my thread of thinking, but the course starts in 15 days, literally 15 days, counting from today. If you have any questions about the structure of the course, or if you want to keep talking about education and design or design leadership or anything related to those things, please contact me. My email is here. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll be super happy and open. For those who are here, it wouldn't be possible to do this with any of you. So this is a special discount that we are offering for your collaboration. I really do thank you for your time and attention. We are trying to raise awareness to the changes that need to be done in the world for design to be done even in a better way, I would say. There's a QR code for our ebook from season 1. There's a new one coming up in a couple of weeks. There's a spoiler, so make sure to download the first one so you will be updated with the second one once it's launched. And that's all for today. I really thank you for being here. Mike, again, thank you so much for putting this together. I would love to invite Marina and Victor to come back. And we have more fire sessions with Mike. Please take a look at ECHO's website so you can register. We have a bunch of amazing talks coming up next week and the following before the program starts. So yeah, come join us. I know Jolina has been joining a bunch. Hoda has been joining a bunch, even though she's our ambassador. I feel so honored to have you here. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you so much for inspiring everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Victor, for the space. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing the space, guys. You guys have been awesome, and I love the dialogue and the conversation. Hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful
Bye.
day.
You too.